Okay, so today I want to talk a little bit about how you might set up a plot for your Biodiversity Index study. You can use a ruler or a tape measure to measure the yards, and you need some string. You can use either the shish kebab sticks, or you can use some type of flagging material, or even a stake, a wooden stake, a coat hanger, anything like that would work. A pair of scissors come in handy, and of course a marker if you want to number your plot. So as you're marking your plot, your directions are going to be 1 yard or 1 meter. Remember, a yard is 36 inches, and a meter is slightly larger, about 39 1/3 inches. So we're going to say 1 yard to be sufficient. You'll take your flagging and make a square, which is 1 yard. Okay, so I've roughly got a 1 yard square area here. And what you'll need to do next, students, is to go ahead and take your data sheet, and you'll want to do a number count of the different species of animals, plants, whatever that you see. It could be an ant, it could be anything. So I want to start with this particular plant here. It's got a flower. It looks like there's 1, 2, looks like there's about 3 of these in this ditch line here. And you don't have to know the name of the species, but you want to do a number of species and count. So you'd code this plant, unknown plant A, with purple flower, identify it somehow, and then do a number count of how many there were in that 1 square yard plot that you have there. Okay, then you'd go to the next plant. Say this plant here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those. So we'd have 6 of these kind of plants. This is a tall grass. You could say it's a type of a tall grass with seed pod. And just so you didn't confuse the types of grass, so this would be an unknown species number 2. You can take pictures of this plant so that you can keep your plants separated and know that you're not counting the same plant. And then if you get into an area where you have a lot of grass, you can estimate the number. Okay, here's another plant. This is a rush. It's a wetland species. If you notice, if you'll get a little closer, this is a ditch line, and in it you'll have some species that live in really damp soils. And so this is a rush. It's a type of water plant that grows in wetlands and in ditches. There's 1 of those here, and there's no other ones in this square area here. So there's just 1 of those, and you would record that as well. If you get an area where the grasses in the field the plants are taller, you might have a little harder time, but you can't forget to get what is down below as well as what's on top. Obviously here we have some goldenrod. This here plant, I have to look it up, but it's another yellow plant, wildflower. Here, this is a young sapling of a tulip poplar. So in this area, if I was to do a square area, I'd start with my goldenrod. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 goldenrods. I have 2 saplings of the tulip poplar. Then I go down a little lower and I'd look for what's down in here. I have some of these taller grasses, and you have to estimate this. So that you'd go by, there were several clumps of this grass, so it looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, mainly 6 of these type of tall grasses. And then there's some smaller plants in between this that you'd have to count those, get an estimate of those. So you might, there's a pretty good number of plants here. I'd have to spend a little more time to really look close and to do my count. But you're going to come into areas where you're going to have a little harder time getting a count. You're going to have to spend more time to look at it. But there's definitely here several of the larger, taller plants, sapling trees, as well as some smaller plants down in this area, and you'd have to just find and describe it. And if you can't describe it, you definitely want to take some photos of the leaves. And again, if you see any insects, like right now I see a fly. I don't know what species the fly, but there was a fly in that area at the time. If I saw a caterpillar or any kinds of insects, I'd want to document that. You most likely are going to scare away any snakes or any other rodents of any sort like that. They probably wouldn't be in your plot, but they could be. They very well could be. Okay, for example, back in here we have the honeybee. On these goldenrods back in here, there's honeybees. So if you were in an area and you saw some type of insect, that you would want to go ahead and record that as well, even if it's as you were doing your plot. Okay, so for example here in this cow pasture here, you'll see sometimes ironweed as well. So you can see ironweed. Down here in this far corner of this property, there's some Joe Pye weed. But if you'll look at the coloration of this, the majority of it is this yellow plant, which is unknown, and a lot of goldenrod that's mixed in between with a lot of saplings of the tulip poplar. So scientists do large plots, not small plots like we're doing 1 square yard. In reality, you may have a group of 15 or 20 scientists that are doing maybe several hundred acres at one time. So they go through and they count the hardwood trees and the mammals and the birds and everything like that that might be in that area. And some of the areas that you come into, you may see that one species has dominated, sort of like a monoculture, the plot. Well, that's okay. You would want to document how many of those species are there and about how many of those individual species were there. Like there might be, the majority of this plot might have 50 of these broadleaf plants. Well, then when you look down into the soil, there will be some of these undergrowth of plants like that are in there. But the majority of this whole area are 2 to 3 species. This broadleaf plant, this more smaller plant like this, and in the front, of course, we have some grasses. So if I did my plot right here, it would only have maybe 3 or 4 different species in the plot altogether. But you're going to run into areas which are dominated by a particular species. And we'll get into that monoculture and what happens when one species dominates over the other and why that happens. So another way you can do it is to use shish kebab sticks. Some people like to take string or yarn and go around to get a better square area of their plot. It don't have to be perfect, but you do need to be close. So you want to start doing a count here. You'll notice that in this grassy area, there's a lot of the same, and it would take you forever probably to count every blade of grass. But what you could do is you can look at these grass species and look and say there might be one with a main root. You don't count each blade, you count each root. So you might count like 10 in a small section like this and say, well, I got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sections like this, and just take the number and multiply by 8 and get an estimate of how many of those plants you have. So I would do that with this particular plant here. Say I got about, 15 here. So in this whole square area, I've got at least 45 to 60, and you would round that off to, let's say, 50, a good estimate. Here is a plant that I do know the name of. It's called plantain. The older plants have a little bit of a wine-looking red color on the stem here. I do know this plant because some people used to use this for greens and would put this into salads, or would melt grease or get hot grease and pour over it for a salad or to eat it with greens. So I have one plant in here, another plant in there, 2, one more 3, one more over here, 4, and looks like maybe one more 5. I have 5 of those in this area. I have some clover here. So I've got just 1, 2, well, then I've got 3, 4, 5. I have 5 clover. It could be white clover. You don't have to know the name of the species. Remember, you just have to know the different kinds, so you do need to document it. If you have 2 species that are very closely related, you have to document something that makes the 2 different, whether it be the shape of the leaf or the color of the flower. So you want to, again, do the number of species. I haven't seen any ants, but if I was to see an ant, I would label it as well, an ant, or if you see a roly-poly or some sort of insect. I do have some moss in here. So moss is kind of hard to count. So you have an area of moss, 1, 2, so we'll say 2 moss. I don't know what species of moss, but I would write down moss, unknown species, 2 areas in which that's found. So that's 2 moss. So you continue doing this until you feel like you've got all your species identified, or all your species accounted for. And you can always learn from the photos that you take, or in the future, the names of the species, if it becomes important that you know the name of the species. Right now, you're just gathering the number of species and the different species. So the different numbers of species and the number or the population of each species is what you're trying to get for your data tables. Remember, all this information needs to be put on a data table. You can submit this to me in your Google Docs. You can renumber the questions with answers that you come up with that will be sufficient for now. Again, this was a demonstration of how to prepare your plot. You'll be going out to your own locations, wherever you would like to do this at. It can be out in a forested area, it can be in your backyard, it can be on the side of the road. Be careful if you do get out where there's any traffic. But good luck with this. Look forward to seeing what your results are. We'll talk more about this in our Zoom meeting.